The Constitution Act of Canada, 1867, Article 91. It shall be lawful for the Queen, by and with the advice and consent of the Senate and House of Commons, to make laws for the peace, order, and good government of Canada, in relation to all matters not coming within the classes of subjects by this Act. So it shall be lawful for the Queen to make laws for the peace, order, and good government of Canada. Sub-Article 3. It shall be lawful for the Queen to make laws concerning the raising of money by any mode or system of taxation. Black Laws, 7th edition. Lawful, not contrary to law, permitted by law. In the Constitution Act of Canada, 1867, Article 91, there's a statement that's made there. It states, it shall be lawful for the Queen, by and with the advice and consent of the Senate and the House of Commons, to make laws for the peace, order, and good government of Canada. So, it shall be lawful. They make a statement for the Queen to make laws. Now, right away, it's to say that it shall be lawful, that it is permitted by law, that it is correct for the Queen to do so. Now, notice that it says that she shall be able to make laws, and these laws are applicable for what? Does it say that they're applicable upon the human being? Is that what it says? That it shall be lawful for the Queen, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Commons, to make laws to apply upon human beings. That's not what it says, right? It says the reason for these laws are for the peace, order, and good government of Canada. So whatever these laws are that are being created, they are for the government of Canada, or to apply for the running of the government of Canada, and not upon human beings. Now within this Article 91, we have a subsection 3. In subsection 3, it states that this Queen here, with the advice of the Senate, can make laws concerning taxation, generating revenue through taxation. I.e., there comes in the Canadian Revenue Agency of Canada, and the human beings on this land being taxed by being designated a Canadian citizen or a person, and thereby there have been laws made which they try and apply upon the Canadian citizen. So in the Constitution Act, when we read that these laws that the Queen is making is for the good, peaceful, and control of the Canadian government, we look at what it says for Canada. And Canada, we know, has a sovereign, or is ruled by a sovereign, by one, who is the Queen. And the Canada they're talking about in that Constitution Act is a Canada that has servants that have been rendered into groups or classes of persons. So a mayor, prime minister, police officer, judge. These are all classes of persons who are all servants of this system, Canada, or of the sovereign, the way it's set up. Now, within these classes of persons, you have the subject here, which is the Canadian citizen, which is what they try to render the human being. An artificial person, a subject and a servant who's taken an oath unto the Queen. Thereby those laws that we just read about in Article 91 of the Constitution Act will apply here. So we read sub-Article 3, taxation. This is a federal enactment. It's called the Canada Revenue Agency Act. An act to continue the Canada Revenue Agency and to amend and repeal other acts as a consequence. Her Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the Senate and House of Commons of Canada, enacts as follows. This act may be cited as the Canada Revenue Agency Act. The interpretation section of this act. The definitions in this section apply in this act. Her Majesty. Binding on Her Majesty. Article 3. This act is binding on Her Majesty in right of Canada or a province. Article 4, subsection 2. Agent of Her Majesty. The agency is for all purposes an agent of Her Majesty in right of Canada. So it shall be lawful for the Queen to make laws concerning taxation and to apply them upon Canadian citizens, which are her subjects, artificial persons. Now when we look to the Canadian Revenue Agency Act, this is an enactment that they created, we find the following declaration in the beginning, in the commencement of this act. Her Majesty, by and with the advice of the Senate and House of Commons, enacts as follows. And then they list the laws. Here we go, the whole list of laws. But notice that it says here, Her Majesty, by and with the advice of the Senate and House of Commons. So we see that expressed in Article 91 of the Constitution Act. It says, Her Majesty can enact laws by and with the advice of the Senate and the House of Commons. So they just restated here what action is taking place. And they say this is lawful. It's lawful, yeah, but it doesn't apply it upon a human being. It's lawful upon Canada. It's lawful upon her subjects and servants. Now, when we look at Article 4 of this Act, it says that the Canada Customs and the Revenue Agency is continued as a body corporate. So that means that it's continued as a legal person, an artificial person. And it will be continued as an artificial person under the name CRA. CRA. And that's where we get the Canadian Revenue Agency. So we see in Article 4.2, it states that the agency, the CRA, is for all purposes. Now notice those wordings, for all purposes. Well, if it's for all purposes, then it's for all purposes. An agent of Her Majesty in right of Canada. So for sure, the CRA is an agent of Her Majesty in right of Canada. Now it's not often that you're going to get this type of expression within the enactments, where they directly, they directly state that the agency or the legal body or the artificial person, the CRA that you're dealing with, is an agent of Her Majesty in the right of Canada. But we understand why. Because back when we look into the Constitution Act, Article 91, it states that the laws that are being implemented, again, remember, those laws, it didn't say are for to be applicable upon human beings. It states that it's for the good governance or for the peace or the order of Canada. And that artificial structure that's been created. So therefore, when it states here that the agency is for all purposes an agent of Her Majesty in the right of Canada, they're talking about that structure again, Canada, where we got the servants, the subjects, the ones who have pledged allegiance, and these laws being enacted to apply upon them, not on human beings or men and women. So again, Canada, Her Majesty, with the Senate and House of Commons, they make laws in right of Canada. Remember that expression, in right of Canada, not in right of a human being. Mandate, Article 5. The agency is responsible for A. Supporting the administration and enforcement of the program legislation. B. Implementing agreements between the Government of Canada or the agency and the government of a province or other public body performing a function of government in Canada to carry out an activity or administer a tax or program. So in Article 5 it states that the agency, which is an agent of Her Majesty and is acting on behalf of Her Majesty, which is clearly expressed in Article 4. The agency, the CRA, which is a legal person also, is responsible for, and then it says A, supporting the administration and enforcement of the program legislation. So the rules, the laws that they enacted under the legislator, well, the agency now is responsible for supporting and enforcing those laws. Now let me ask you a question. Who are they enforcing those laws upon? Or who are they supposed to be enforcing those laws upon? It's in the right of Canada. It shall be lawful for the Queen to make laws for the good order and governance of what? Of Canada, not of human beings. So when we come into the laws and they say that they're responsible for supporting the administration and enforcement of the program legislation of these laws, it's for the Canadian citizen, for the legal person. The minister is responsible for the agency. Article 69. Legal proceedings. Actions, suits, and other legal proceedings in respect of any right or obligation acquired or incurred by the agency, whether in its own name or in the name of Her Majesty in right of Canada, may be brought or taken by or against the agency in the name of the agency. So in that same enactment, we look in Article 69, and it says that an action or suits or other legal proceedings in respect of any right or obligation acquired or incurred by the agency. Wow, what a big long sentence. Any obligation acquired or incurred by the agency. So let's start. The agency, remember, is an agent of Her Majesty. The agency is operating under laws that have been enacted because they've been declared lawful by the Queen, the Senate, and the House of Commons, and they are applicable in Canada upon her subjects. Okay, so there's our obligations. Now what about the fact that there are human beings that exist here on Canada and they refuse to take recognition as a juridical personality, as a legal person? So what obligation that is acquired or incurred upon the agency to respect those rights? What obligation is there? Now it says that an action or a suit can be taken in its own name, meaning you can sue it by the CRA, or in the name of Her Majesty in the right of Canada. And they added that again, in the right of Canada. Every time you see that sentence, in the right of Canada, you're talking about that commercial system that has been built. You're talking about that structure in the right of Canada, the structure that's the hierarchy structure, where the sovereign is there, and her servants and subjects come under her. That's in the right of Canada. That's what you got to get in your mind. Now the CRA, as agent, has an obligation to know that there are human rights and fundamental freedoms in operation in this world, that they are internationally respected, and that they run from country to country, and that before they go trying to apply an obligation upon an artificially created juridical personality that attaches to a human being, because nowhere in this does it say that these laws are applicable upon a human being. And in fact, we can draw out many articles of law that says the human being has the right to decide whether he wants to be part of the government that is ruling in the territory where he is functioning in, or where he is residing in, or living, or making his life. That's a fundamental freedom that's been granted to a human being. You have a right to be part of the government, either alone or through a representative. It's a right you've been granted. It's not a right you must express. But here, when it comes to taxation, the agents that are operating as an agent of Her Majesty, as a representative of Her Majesty in the right of Canada, want to forget about all that. And they just want to apply all the enacted laws upon everyone that comes in their way. And they don't want to face their obligation that is acquired and incurred under the international articles of law.